Welcome back to the Christian Century YouTube channel. I'm John, and I'm joined today by one of our writers, Caroline Langston, who has written a piece for us about the novel The Hours by Michael Cunningham and her own life. The piece is called Clarissa and Her Flowers. So we're going to be chatting about that today. Before we do, Caroline, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I live outside of Washington, D.C., and I'm a development director, but I have continued to publish throughout my 25-year career and have published both fiction and nonfiction. I was a longtime blogger for both Image, Journal, the Arts, and Religion, and now for Slant Books. And in another life, pre-Second Child, I was a commentator on NPR's All Things Considered.
Wow, well, quite a journey. We're really glad you've written now for us. Um, This piece is titled after, and there's beautiful artwork as well, about a specific moment in the movie and the book, The Hours. A moment when a character named Clarissa, portrayed by Meryl Streep in the movie, sets out on the sidewalk holding flowers. And you write about the moment in the movie, and then you share in the essay the paragraph in the book that inspired that moment in the movie. And it's such a powerful image, and it seems like it's had great significance to you in your life and in your journey. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about the personal connection you've made with that moment in the movie and or the book.
Well, I remember when I saw the movie, which the essay goes into sort of the time in my life. It was just about when I was about to have my first child. My husband was in a rock band. He'd go out on Saturday nights, and I would watch movies in our back bedroom and knit. And I think it's kind of a secular analogy to a spiritual experience. You know, one in my spiritual tradition, I'm Eastern Orthodox. You look at religious saints as sort of models for your behavior, models for your own endurance, people to whom you make appeal for strength. And this, I would say, when I saw the image in the film of Meryl Streep, determined to make this party happen for her friend who's dying for age, and determined to have these flowers, it was kind of an opportunity for secular veneration. And around about this time, I found out that my rather dramatically, we found out that my mother had Alzheimer's because she gave away a lot of money. And there was a huge, big family crisis uh, to try to take care of her. And I internalized this image of just getting through it, and getting through it joyfully. That having coming from a position of strength and being able to barrel down the sidewalk and make it happen, and to bring beauty, to bring joy, to recover the situation. I think in the social discussion about how do we repair our culture, I think that I internalize that figure. That's what the Clarissa figure signifies for me, is to be a figure of repair. I obviously think of this as a Christian very deeply in terms of my own veneration of the saints, but here's a totally secular one that anybody can access. Um, I had to barrel through to deal with my mother when she had Alzheimer's. Then when I had my children, and my husband worked overnight for many, many years. And then obviously the latest health crisis that the essay details. It's been one thing of going through one thing to the next, and being able to kind of appeal to endurance, but also to do so with beauty.
Thank you so much. You mentioned that Clarissa's friend is dying of AIDS, and in the essay, you say that the book in this storyline, and I think maybe all its storylines in some ways, exposes the kingdom of illness. And you look back on the AIDS crisis in the essay, and you say you see it now as profoundly Christian. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about the connection you see between the Christian faith and this kingdom of illness.
Well, I have to say, as somebody who came of age in the late 80s, early 90s, all this was completely unavoidable and unmistakable. I think to sort of term that as Christian is something that would both surprise the people who were going through many of the people who were going through the AIDS crisis at the time, and it would certainly surprise a lot of the church folk that I knew at the time. In the terms of it being Christian, is that, we have bodies, and our bodies are holy. This is often quite neglected, I think, in different strands of Christianity. They're out there in which, you're sort of a spirit in kind of a shell. And that whole idea is migrated into the secular culture as well. But if you sort of, if you look at the earliest traditions of, say, if you visited the catacombs in Rome or anything, that there's great care to taking care of the body, even when it's in decline, even when it's in illness. And I think that, it took me later to study, to learn more about my faith and to live more deeply in it, to see that. And then I suddenly realized, oh, wow, I had been surrounded by these incredible images, and, they were holy, whether they knew it or not, of people who were caring for other people and taking care of them. I have a poem I'll share with you that I wrote about that I've pegged to World AIDS Day, that later on, that I wrote about an encounter with a man with KP lesions on the Houston city bus about 30 years ago. And, how that sort of moment clicked for me about how the body, even in decline, is not disposable. And this is something, too, that, it fits with, this is the great unspeakable, both in terms of thinking about being pro-life and also thinking about like disability rights and everything else, is what do we do with the body?
At the end of the essay, um, you talk a bit more about your own journey lately, and this part of the essay was incredibly moving, and I thank you for writing it. You talk about your husband's health struggles and the different forms of death that you've been navigating, journeying through that. And then you say, but there are still the flowers. And you talk about the twinning of life and death in both the novel and movie and in your own experience. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about this twinning of life and death and what that's been like to navigate.
Well, it feels as though since my husband became sick in June 2023, that we've kind of been on a tightrope of constantly only being able to live with an eye towards death. Uh, After his initial surgery, he had an aortic dissection, and had was quite soon we found out he was paralyzed below the waist. But he also did not have any real awareness of what had happened to him for about a month. Then there were 2 months of intensive therapy at a rehab hospital, where he still was in and out about what he was cognizant of. And then there have been sort of, a year basically since then. And in fact, today that we're talking on Halloween, and it's a year ago today that he was discharged from his second subacute rehab center. And then there were still several more hospitalizations after that. And I think as a result, there have been many months, many times where I wasn't sure whether he was going to live. And I, wasn't sure. I had that moment with the flowers barreling down the sidewalk where I had to be in charge. And, in an odd way, that was very sort of empowering too, is that I felt like I was the repository of getting things done and I was going to get it done. I've not only thought of his mortality, and he's doing amazingly well, actually. Um, thank God. But thinking about my own, what can I not complete? What will he not complete? How long will this be? Both of us have talked about some things may have been easier had he died when he was initially ill. He's thought that at times. Um, it certainly, I've thought that as well. That's the sort of secret at the heart of this. And yet, what if that had happened? There would have been a certain narrative, sort of facile narrative completion had he died when he did. That he could have been lauded and celebrated for who he was. It would have had a tight narrative focus. We have no narrative now. There's caretaking, there is sadness, there is uncertainty, but also there's just amazing joy. I mean, I am going to get him in his wheelchair, and we are going to go out in the front yard, and we are going to hand out $60 worth of candy to our neighbors, because we do live in one of those neighborhoods where nobody bowls alone. I would say that because of all that uncertainty, every single tiny moment is kind of refracted into eternity. And I wouldn't miss this for anything. I really wouldn't miss it for anything. And I think also as well, I think sort of classically, faith deals well in uncertainty, and, endings that are not particularly happy or not particularly resolved. We all know, for those of you who are Westerners, the sort of going to ashes, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, you're going to return. We all know that is going to happen to us, and we lie about it to ourselves all the time. And I think even the people who are, you will hear people periodically say, well, if that ever happens to me, just kill me. And I think that that's a way of eliding the question. If you say just kill me, you don't have to really deal with the death. We are in death. What's the famous Augustine statement, which I'm so ill read on this kind of stuff, about being born between feces and urine? I mean, that's like the truth. And I feel as though one of the great gifts about this has to sort of, and I will be perfectly honest and say that it is not always pleasant. Yet to feel that every single moment, even the stupid ones, are charged with eternity. They're charged with value. So that's part of the flowers, but also part of it is just realizing, like, I love this man. I'm glad I married him. This is somehow a sort of significant kind of completion. I don't have to reach for meaning in my life because the meaning is sort of embedded in everything that I'm doing.
Thank you so much for sharing those reflections with us. This article and our conversation has reminded me the power of art and the idea that we engage with it, we see ourselves in it, and then sometimes we also see that art playing out in our own lives. And this beautiful essay has helped me see that again. So thank you. For those of you out there who have not yet gotten the chance to read Clarissa and Her Flowers, the link to that essay will be below in the video description, along with the poem that Caroline mentioned earlier and some other writings that you can read from her from other outlets across the internet. Thank you so much for chatting today, Caroline.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure to be here with you.